No, that's not for you!
An 82-year-old man sat alone in a wheelchair inside a beautiful $1 million mansion in Connecticut. He could not walk. He could barely speak. The only person responsible for caring for him during the day was the woman his son loved and trusted more than anyone else in the world. Every morning she smiled gently as her husband prepared for work. She helped the old man adjust his blanket and spoke in a soft, reassuring voice. Anyone watching would believe she was compassionate and devoted. But the moment the front door closed and Daniel's car disappeared down the long driveway, the warmth disappeared. The kindness stopped, and the helpless man in the wheelchair slowly realized something terrifying. The woman who promised to care for him was the very person turning his life into something unbearable. What happened inside that quiet house remained hidden for months until one unexpected person witnessed the truth, and the recordings that later surfaced left even the courtroom silent. Every morning Daniel Whitmore followed the same routine. He kissed his wife, Emily Carter, goodbye before leaving for work and reminded her to call if his father, Richard, needed anything. Daniel believed he had married the kindest woman he had ever known. She cooked for his disabled father. She pushed his wheelchair into the garden so he could enjoy the sunlight. She held the old man's hand and spoke to him patiently when his speech became slow and difficult. To Daniel, the scene felt peaceful, almost perfect. But inside the mansion behind closed doors, the moment Daniel left the house, everything changed. The smiles disappeared. The gentle voice faded. And the woman he loved became someone entirely different. A woman capable of cruelty that made the old man in the wheelchair fear every new day. For months, no neighbors noticed. No relatives suspected anything. No friends imagined the truth. And the question that later haunted everyone who heard the story was painfully simple. How could something so cruel happen inside a house that looked so comfortable and secure from the outside? Daniel Whitmore had built a life many people admired. By his mid-40s, he had become a successful property investor managing several commercial buildings across Connecticut. His home sat on a quiet piece of land outside Hartford, surrounded by tall trees and iron gates that shielded the estate from the busy world beyond. To visitors, the house represented success, stability, and comfort. Inside that home lived the person Daniel loved most in the world, his father, Richard Whitmore. Richard was 82 years old and confined to a wheelchair after suffering a severe stroke 3 years earlier. Before the stroke, Richard had been a strong, disciplined businessman who built a construction company that helped develop road, schools, and shopping centers throughout the state. People who worked with him described him as demanding but fair and fiercely loyal to his family. After Daniel's mother died, when Daniel was still a child, Richard raised his son alone, balancing long hours at work with the responsibility of being both father and mother. Their relationship grew into something deeper than most families experienced. Daniel often said his father was the reason he never gave up, even when business risks felt overwhelming. When the stroke struck Richard at 79, everything changed in an instant. The once powerful man who spent his life building projects with his own hands suddenly lost control of his legs. His speech slowed to the point where forming a sentence required enormous effort. Doctors explained that while he would survive the stroke, he would need assistance for the rest of his life. Many people suggested placing him in a professional care facility where trained nurses could supervise his daily needs. Daniel rejected that idea immediately. He believed family should care for family, especially after everything his father had sacrificed for him. Instead, he renovated a large section of his mansion, adding ramps, medical equipment, and a spacious bedroom with wide windows overlooking the gardens. Several nurses were hired to assist with daily tasks, but the work proved emotionally exhausting and many did not remain long. The situation improved when Emily Carter entered their lives. Emily was 28 and possessed a calm, friendly personality that immediately impressed Daniel. She explained that she had previously helped care for elderly relatives and understood the patience required for someone recovering from a stroke. From the beginning, she treated Richard with what appeared to be remarkable compassion. She fed him slowly so he would not choke. She listened when he struggled to speak and encouraged him to keep trying. Visitors often commented on how gentle she seemed while pushing his wheelchair through the garden paths. Daniel began to feel something he had not experienced in years, a sense that life inside the house was finally balanced again. Over time, their friendship deepened and eventually turned into a romantic relationship. Within a year, Daniel proposed and Emily became his wife. Friends congratulated him, believing he had found someone who genuinely cared for both him and his father. Yet small details began to trouble Richard in ways he could not clearly explain. When Emily believed no one else was watching, her tone sometimes hardened and her patience seemed to disappear. Richard attempted to warn Daniel on several occasions, but the stroke had damaged his ability to form clear sentences. The words came out slowly and often sounded confusing. Daniel assumed his father was simply frustrated by the limitations of his speech and encouraged him to rest instead of forcing himself to talk. Richard remained silent even as the uneasy feeling inside him continued to grow. The morning after the wedding, Daniel followed his usual routine. He kissed Emily goodbye near the front door and reminded her to call if Richard needed anything during the day. She smiled reassuringly and promised she would take good care of him. Daniel's car rolled down the long driveway and disappeared beyond the iron gates. Silence settled across the mansion. Emily waited for several seconds before walking toward Richard's room. The warmth in her voice vanished completely the moment she entered. Without warning, she grabbed the handles of the wheelchair and pushed it roughly across the floor until the metal frame struck the side of a wooden table. The old man gasped as pain shot through his body. Emily leaned down close to his face and whispered harsh words, telling him he was nothing but a useless burden wasting his son's money. Richard tried to protest, but the sounds that emerged were slow and broken. Emily laughed, openly mocking his attempts to speak and repeating his slurred words in a cruel voice. From that day forward, a pattern began repeating itself every morning after Daniel left for work. Emily delayed Richard's meals, sometimes leaving him hungry for hours while she ignored his attempts to call for help. On several occasions, she placed a glass of water just beyond his reach, watching him stretch his weak arms toward it while she stood nearby. If he dropped a spoon, she shouted insults. If he moved too slowly, she shoved the wheelchair forward, causing his body to slam against the metal frame. One afternoon, when soup spilled across the table, Emily struck him across the face with the back of her hand. Tears formed in Richard's eyes, but he could not defend himself. By evening, Emily transformed once again into the caring wife Daniel believed she was. She gently fed Richard dinner and described the day as calm and pleasant. Daniel thanked her repeatedly for her patience, unaware that his father spent every afternoon trapped in a silent nightmare. Months passed and Richard's condition began to decline. He lost weight and the strength in his arms weakened further. Doctors believed the changes were related to age and the lasting damage from the stroke. Daniel trusted their explanation, though he occasionally noticed faint bruises on his father's arms or shoulders. Emily always had an answer, claiming Richard had bumped into furniture or that his skin bruised easily due to his age. Daniel accepted those explanations because he trusted the woman he married. The truth might have remained hidden much longer if a new person had not entered the house. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, a 35-year-old housemaid recommended by a neighbor. Daniel hired her to assist with cleaning and cooking, believing additional help would reduce the pressure on Emily. At first, Emily appeared welcoming, but she soon gave Sarah strict instructions to remain in the kitchen area and avoid Richard's room unless specifically asked to help. Sarah found the rule unusual yet respected it until one afternoon when a loud crash echoed through the hallway. Concerned, she walked toward the sound and noticed the door to Richard's room slightly open. What she saw inside stopped her completely. Emily stood beside the wheelchair, her face filled with anger, while Richard struggled to steady himself. The chair had tipped sideways, and Emily jerked it upright with unnecessary force before shouting harsh words telling him he should stop wasting space in the house. Sarah quietly stepped away, but the scene remained in her mind. Over the following days, she began noticing more troubling behavior. She heard Emily yelling insults when she believed no one was nearby. She saw bruises on Richard's arms that looked far worse than accidental bumps. The realization slowly formed that the old man was being mistreated by the very person responsible for caring for him. Sarah faced a difficult decision because confronting Emily directly could cost her job. Yet remaining silent meant allowing the abuse to continue. Eventually, she began recording short videos on her phone, capturing moments when Emily thought no one else was watching. The recordings revealed the same disturbing pattern again and again. Emily shoving the wheelchair across the floor. Emily mocking Richard's speech. Emily withholding food while laughing at his struggle to reach it. After several days, Sarah knew she had gathered enough evidence. One evening when Daniel returned home, she approached him nervously and asked him to watch the videos. At first, Daniel refused to believe the accusation because it contradicted everything he thought he knew about his wife. But when the recordings began playing, his expression slowly changed. On the screen, Emily pushed the wheelchair violently until it struck the wall and Richard's head snapped backward from the impact. Another video captured her repeating his broken words in a cruel, mocking tone. Daniel watched silently, his hands shaking as the truth became impossible to deny. He walked into his father's room holding the phone and asked gently if the videos were real. Richard looked at him with exhausted eyes and tears rolled down his cheeks. Police were contacted that same night. Officers arrived at the mansion and confronted Emily with the recordings. At first, she attempted to deny the accusations, but the evidence left little room for explanation. She was arrested as shocked neighbors watched the scene unfold outside the quiet estate. During the trial, prosecutors presented the recordings to the jury exposing the months of abuse Richard had endured. Witnesses, including Sarah, described what they had seen inside the house. The jury reached its decision quickly, finding Emily Carter guilty of severe elder abuse and assault. Although the verdict delivered justice, the emotional impact remained with the family. Richard's health never fully recovered from the months of fear and neglect he experienced. Yet once the truth came out, the constant tension slowly disappeared from his eyes. Daniel devoted himself to ensuring his father received proper care, bringing professional caregivers into the home and staying more involved in his daily routine. Sarah continued working with the family, becoming someone Richard trusted deeply. Her decision to speak up had ended the suffering that no one else had noticed. Stories like this raise an uncomfortable question. How many vulnerable people live quietly behind closed doors, hoping someone will notice their silent distress before it becomes too late? Before we go further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. And after hearing this story, many people ask themselves the same thing. If they had been in Sarah Mitchell's position, would they have had the courage to reveal the truth?